We need to energize ourselves now because we're preparing for the second part of the day, and now we're shifting a bit, right? We're shifting towards big data architecture, and it's a pleasure to invite on the stage the next speaker, Tobias Margarit, Managing Director of Diconium Data, the specialist for data and artificial intelligence. With 15 years experience in data strategies, he successfully implements AI and BI projects for client in data-driven business management. Tobias also spent 10 years successfully designing and scaling digital data analytics platform for a southern German automotive manufacturer in Germany, China, and the US. And Tobias will discuss a new organizational paradigm to create data value, data mesh. He will demonstrate which organizational structure would be beneficial for large companies, also looking at the importance of agreed data ownership for the success of the data mesh framework. Welcome, Tobias. The stage is all yours.
Thank you. So after lunch, I know. So I hope I meet the expectation and get you energized.
No pressure.
So since a few years, I'm participating in a discussion which is driving me nuts because, and I'm giving you a little bit of context in the introduction of the presentation, why so many data projects fail. Because it's the first time that from a computational power and from the technologies are available. But no matter whether you look at, especially in non-data native organizations, how you teach and how you transform that kind of organizations in order to become data-driven companies or data decision-making companies, the question is why so many projects, and I'm showing that because we're talking about data, I'm showing some data which is proving that. And what the problem around is, so my presentation will not be so much, I'm sharing my kind of thoughts over the last few years, how you teach organizations in order to become data-driven, and what responsibility, so the lack of responsibility or the shift of responsibility to people who are not responsible for creating the data, which kind of effects will that have? And for those of you who are following the discussion around data mesh, which is a topic now since 2 or 3 years, which is a socio-cultural management topic. It's not so much driven by technology, of course, that has a part of it. That's why I like to invite you in that kind of discussion, and hopefully you get some thoughts until you're leaving the place today and you are getting to the topic. So to give you a little bit of context, I just searched here some e-commerce data, especially since COVID. People are buying from home. The number of persons or the number of transactions which are done in e-commerce is exploding, and that's affecting all economic and social factors, social not factors and areas of all the environment. And especially COVID also accelerate that process heavily. So transaction, business processes, customer interactions and services are digitized, and of course change also the entire value creation chain. Of course we are drowning because of that effect in data. So the effect is that 90% of the companies, they more and more considering as a production factor, like they have people, like they have capital and so on. And the question is how organizations like us or experts in the data ecosystem, let's say, are going to create value out of that. And if you look into several investigations, these are figures now from 2019, because I was just lazy to research the latest reports. But if you look here to Gartner or to Capgemini, what they are saying around how successful data projects especially in non-data native organizations are, they are coming really to a little bit sad result. So only 20% of analytics projects are really successful. So 80% are failing. That reminds us a little bit of why we invented Scrum in order to higher the probability of creating good software products, because we had the same results here. And I think if I look at the numbers, it's nearly the same. So that's pretty interesting. And what are the reasons behind? Because I introduced it from an organizational perspective. So Gardner says poor skills. So the competence in organizations is missing, how to cope with it. A poor organizational integration out of that, so how to collaborate. I think many of you know the problem in bigger organizations. Data siloing is a very big issue. Then also how to integrate the management of data into a business strategy. What are companies, so of course they are saying we have a new production factor, but how they are going to integrate it into their strategy, and so on and so on. And now, of course, the question needs to be asked, okay, so now, do we leave it? And I'm trying to get the intent to come to that point that I believe, of course, it's valid to follow that topic up, but nevertheless, maybe a mind shift at certain perspective is maybe necessary. And that's how data mesh has been implemented, because some consultancy companies from ThoughtWorks, J-Mark Degani, who's the intellectual owner of that topic. So she did a lot of research in that. She's from Iran and living now in the Silicon Valley and participating there in the product community. And she actually invented that, and the topic is really about responsibility and how we as an organization cope with that. So where we are coming from, the biggest problem is the great divide. So you have a business domain who is producing data, whether it's a software team, a product team, or also in traditional organizations, somebody from production planning, whoever, they are creating data. And we are creating a pipeline, a ETL pipeline into non-data native companies somewhere in IT. We are storing it there. We are creating a lot of pipelines in order to create some business intelligence or some analytical data plane. And of course, we are doing that with one, and the consumers are coming, data scientists, machine learning engineers, they want to consume the data, create their artificial intelligence products on it. And you're coming to the point that it's getting more and more complex. And certain organizational parts are getting overwhelmed by the demand and by the facts what they are looking for. And for those of you who are working in bigger companies or consulting companies in order to create things like that, that's becoming really a complex topic, especially in the times where we have hyper-specialized data engineers, for example, and the source of talents are getting more and more scarce into the market. And that's why those kind of organizations are really running into a challenging situation. And what is the issue behind that? So we have here with that orange bars, the borders, and it shows a little bit in a symbolic way of how the culture here is integrated. So you have this technology complexity and the separation of operational and analytical data affects, of course, the culture and the accountability. So we have, on the one hand, I call them here the data producers. So for example, it's a software team or it's an organization responsible for business process X and Y. And they are producing the data, and you have on the other hand the data consumers, decision makers, data scientists, analysts, and so on, who are taking care of a BI infrastructure, of an analytical platform. And in the middle, you have data engineers and ML engineers who are running in trouble because they can cope with the ETL pipelines and facing all those issues. So this is a situation which is, if you go into bigger companies like that, which is, I would say, not a normal one, but they can see that fact if they are coping with that. And of course, that is creating a lot of pressure. And I personally think this is maybe one of the reasons, not the reason, but a bigger one, why only 20% of the projects of data initiatives into organizations are successful. Because it's an organizational reason, it's not a technological one. If you look a little bit in the past, what we are offering from a technological perspective, the truth is, we have three generations now of data platforms. Each of them are very monolithic. So we have a centralized data storage. You are asking the departments, please give me your data. I'm providing you the data model behind that. So very, very proprietary, very a monolithic style of working, and that is creating that kind of bottlenecks, especially for data engineers. So we have a centralized and monolithic infrastructure. It doesn't embrace change, meaning when domain responsible teams are creating new ideas or new use cases or something like that, they are generally refusing, or you get a date of delivery in 2 years until they change the data model and everything, also the catalog. A pipeline decomposition, which is ignoring a diversity of use cases and not creating an innovative culture within organizations. And as I said, you have a siloed, hyper-specialized ownership, which is creating a problem of speed of response and so on. So this is at the end the topic where we are. And I think that is one of the reasons why it comes to that point that many projects are not successful. Considering the fact what is happening in general in organizations, so you come to that point that this kind of monolithic infrastructure is how how enterprises are organized in the past. So you have these pyramids, you have a very hierarchical layer of decision making, and of course that leads also to the point that you are controlling. We heard today a lot of access of data, so not about exchange of data. We heard a lot about who is controlling what, who has access to what, and so on. That's a pyramid, but at the end, digitalization leads to that topic. So we're creating more network. We want to create a resilient organization and smaller product teams which are communicating with each other and so on. And now the big question to the data community is how to cope with that. Because with that kind of platform thinking, as we did currently with a third generation data lake houses and a lot of data marts infrastructure, we heard a little bit about distributed computation within the blockchain presentation in the beginning. But how are we going to cope with that in order to bring that? And I believe this is not driven by a technological change. So I think we need to talk about the organization and how we are organizing it. And actually, as a matter of fact, we have pretty good examples how this evolved in software development. So if you look into the object-oriented world, I know that when I was, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where this is, so now it's followed by microservices on Kubernetes clusters or wherever you're deploying that. So I think the same principles needs to be adapted into the data world. And you need to bring that on the plate. And this is what is data mesh at the end about. So data mesh is a socio-cultural approach to shift the responsibility of operational data who is producing it together with the analytical size. So at the end, to make it simple, we make the people responsible who are producing it. So if it's a software development team who is creating data out of the interaction with their application, they are responsible for the data. They are responsible for the data protection. They are responsible for a right encryption and so on and so on. And if you consider that in your mind, and that's the idea of Zhamak Dehghani, who created that concept, and I think she launched the first scientific paper, I think was in 2019. This leads to a thinking that we are decentralizing the infrastructure, and we need to find a way in order not to lose the value of a central what a central data source is promising, because you're mixing the data out of different sources with each other. That you need to have certain philosophical and operative attributes within the organization that the people are consuming their data, each other, and that then needs to be standardized. So in order to do so, there are 4 principles provided by a data mesh in order to get to that decentral concept, which is creating that kind of, if you keep that in mind, this kind of network what I created there, that those nodes are talking to each other. So we made the data producers responsible for their data, and now we need to take care of how those nodes are communicating to each other and consume the data of other people in both directions. The first principle, and I'm going through the principles in the following, is data as a product. So we don't treat data anymore as a data as a byproduct. So we are developing our software, and afterwards we are thinking about what we are doing with the data now. We give it to the IT department or to the BI department. They should do something with it. No, this time is over. Second, a domain-orientated ownership and architecture. Third, there needs to be a kind of marketplace that you get an overview of what data products are available in my company, in my ecosystem, in my software development department, whatever. And you need to have a kind of federated computational governance model in order to rule that decentralized development of data products. So first, data as a product. If I make the producer responsible for the data, what they are creating, no matter whether it's their operational data or their analytical data, I think it's pretty important to get a product mindset into the organization in terms of data. So they are creating data as a product. That means they are treating, assuming this, for example, it's a microservice team. They are then also responsible for the second product, which is their analytical data, which the microservice, for example, is producing. And that requires, of course, a certain mindset. If for those of you who are a product manager or something like that, you know what it means. The most important is you get close to your client. So who is the consumer of your data product? And what are the USPs? Is there a market for that available, no matter whether it's an internal market or whether it's an external market? We talked in the morning, I think, about the monetization of data. Of course, maybe there are also subscription services around that, what you can produce. So all those questions are relevant then for the producer of that kind of data in order to get that product mindset into place. And these products are responsible in the domains, yeah, we at the end we combining there the business responsibility and the operational data and anchor it in this one domain behind that. Of course, that product needs to have certain attributes, which some are similar to software products here. So there needs to be discoverable. So there needs to be a central source where I can find what kind of data sets are available in the organization, which I can consume. How is the access control to that data set, if it's personalized information and so on. They need to be addressable. So how I'm going to speak with a product, what kind of exchange formats are there that I can consume it, how can I integrate the data of other domain into the development of my product. It needs to be declarative and self-describing, so everybody needs to understand when I'm consuming the data, what are they doing, where they are targeting to, and how can I combine them with mine. And then, of course, we had many talks about the data security issue this morning. Secure, they need to be trustworthy from a corrective source of interaction. And pretty important, we need to ensure interoperability, that data products in the organization, when we have, I don't know, 100 of them, that they are talking to each other and they can consume the data with each other, because that provides a pretty interesting ground for innovative development, because you are starting to combine them with each other. So the philosophy behind data as a product is the following, that you're not bringing data to a central place, you're storing them, and then a central BI department is thinking of what could be relevant for their organization. No, the business owner are taking care of it on their own. So the domains are responsible at the end of it, and they are driving their business, and they know it much more better than a central department of, for example, in the IT or something like that. And if you consider that over time, then an ecosystem of data products are generated, hopefully, within an organization, and that will transform a whole organization. I see that the same. We are now since 2 years a part of the Volkswagen Group, and of course that's the biggest company in Europe. And we are working heavily on projects like autonomous driving and so on. And you can't invent in such a big organization a central BI unit. This is not working. This is impossible. You can't scale that, no matter whether I would like to have that, but the organization is not able to manage that. That's 600,000 people with I don't know, 110 factories, 10 million cars, what they are producing. And that is impossible to integrate that. So for companies like that, that will provide a common crowd in order to get the value out of that, what I talked to you in the beginning. And what I also liked about that kind of philosophy, I mean, at the end, the humans are animals, yeah? And they are thinking on their own, and they are hunting on their own, and they can do what they can do the best. And if I can avoid collaboration on one point, I can do it on my own. Sometimes people are like that, they are doing it like that. So it's a very national and organic concept which fits to the collaboration of a team. You're integrating into the product vision of your product teams or of your domain teams, and you are able to consume that by far more easy. I showed that here as an example. I use a traditional one because I'm working for traditional companies and helping them to integrate that. So if you have departments like sales, purchase, production, finance, or you can add some, how that kind of product thinking in terms of sales is working. So I make an example. So for example, I'm responsible for production planning of a big factory or something like that, and I'm creating output. I have just-in-time processes behind in order to order parts and to meet the demand of sales, what they are predicting. It would be very interesting for me to give that kind of prediction to our sales guys in order to help me to get my efficiency and my effective production planning into place. So for that, I'm creating a data product, and I make it available for my client sales. So you have internal clients, and this kind of methodology, I think, is then pretty clear what I mean with that. Second, domain-orientated, decentralized data ownership and architecture. I showed that here with an example, I think, what I use. I said this is a process mining dashboard from a leading car manufacturer. I think it's shown here at Celonis. So again, so if we are decentralized that responsibility and we clarifying the responsibility as we are doing it with software products, as we are doing it with business processes, and so on, that will create also a mindset of the people that they are responsible for that, how they are creating that. That will not solve all the issues of data security and data privacy, but at least you make the people responsible for creating it. And I think that's the matter of importance. And that's how you are creating a kind of mentality within the organization who feels responsible for it, and who feels also responsible for concerns like data privacy and so on. So that's why I showed here business processes, because you don't need to explain that to departments. So if you're creating the ownership of business processes, everybody is saying, yes, I'm responsible for that process. And I think you need to come to the same point in terms of coping with analytics or operational data, or the creation of intelligence products around artificial intelligence and so on. So if you're coming then to that point, to that two things, you need to have some kind of prerequisites in order to create that kind of decentralized responsibility. there needs to be a foundation. So first is self-service data infrastructure, which is a kind of marketplace around products, and this kind of marketplace needs to implement certain standards on different levels. So there are some standards which are not negotiable, like identity and access management. We talked about security and so on. We have a developer plane which is decentralized because the data products are developed decentralized, and you have a kind of federation, a federated governance level where the people are talking about control. So let me lose some words around that. So self-service data infrastructure. So on a plane infrastructure plane, of course, there is you are creating a world standards. So for example, a CI/CD pipelines, networking, access control, a polyglot data storage, and so on. You have a developer platform here in Orange. They are embracing change. Of course, data products will be also killed if they are not consumed. If the analytical data are saying nobody is consuming your product, then you're killing it, of course. That is an issue, and I saw that also this feels when especially in the BI world, we have so many cases where the customer is coming to us and say, hey, I'm a data-driven company, I have 110 dashboards available, and then the servers are going down and nobody's taking care of it. So they don't give a shit about the dashboard. So they are not making decisions out of that. That will not happen with that, because if data products are not consumed, you see that pretty fast, then you're killing that. And of course, you need to have a level how you are affecting the governance principles, which needs to be a mix. So that is not a monolithic centralized infrastructure. Of course, you have a kind of platform team who's taking care of the global standards, but together with a product development a community, they are creating and they are deciding what kind of standards are we applying where. So at the end, and from a technology, I left here out the technology because I just thought I want to focus on the organizational part. But if you look at technologies like companies like Databricks, for example, or Pesto, they are running, everybody's running in this direction. So if you see the word data lakehouse and all those stuff, this is running at least in this direction. And I believe from an organizational perspective that is a very, very important issue in order to create that value out of it, what data deserves. So to sum it up, I believe a mindset shift is necessary. So from a centralized ownership to a decentralized one. This topic, pipelines as first concern, kill it. Domain data are relevant. This topic, data as a byproduct, for those of you who are coming from software engineering, so thinking afterwards what kind of analytical data. Nobody wants to measure his own work. Yes, I understand that, because that can hurt. Data as a byproduct to add it afterwards is data is a equalized production factor. So data as a product is centralized. Siloed data teams, no, we're integrating them more and more into the domain teams, no, whether it's departments or modern companies, software development, and we are creating an ecosystem of data products which is communicating to each other. And it's interesting as an introduction for the big data architecture issues, because that could be a second talk about it. So at the moment, I don't know whether you are following that. So there is an interesting concept of going on. I guess that will be maybe the 4th generation of data platforms, how they are providing for several levels of organizational maturity, what kind of architectural concept in order to become a decentralized data-driven organization one day, applying a data mesh architecture. So I know I have 12 minutes left. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Tobias. Do we have questions for Tobias?
Hello, thank you for the presentation, very interesting. A couple of questions. First of all, how do you get teams to think of data as a product instead of byproduct. I mean, usually you have these operational teams, like you mentioned, they have their own business processes. Who gets to choose what should be a data product? From an organizational perspective, how do you transfer this knowledge? Hey, we would need this stuff from you because we could use it.
So first of all, I think that's not so much a question of data as a product. It's more a question of how do you teach people to think and act customer-centric. So if you come to that point and an organization is asking themselves, so I'm creating now next to my traditional product out of my business processes or the creation of my software product and so on, my second product will be a data product, for example. Who is consuming that? That kind of question, I think this is how you're creating a responsibility. Product managers is a different one, yeah? So you can talk also that you are implementing there a separate product manager for the data product X and Y, who is leading that team. That would be, of course, another topic to talk about it. But I think it's a qualification of the organization.
Do you see, I don't know, maybe having some sort of cross-organizational committee or somebody to oversee this and provide the standards, or how does that work? I
think in a phase of the maturity of an organization, that could be a valid thing. I think that depends now also from the organizational consultancy areas around that discussion, how to drive up that concept, because I think it will be more than one step until you become really a decentralized organization. Maybe you're applying it only in parts of the organization, not to the whole one. And yes, that, for example, I'm not a big fan of metrics organizations, to be honest, because I have never seen it working, or never seen it working efficiently, let's say. But in the beginning, that could be, of course, a topic that you say you are creating a kind of platform team, for example, and the domain teams are consuming that.
Okay, and for the second question, let's say, you didn't touch at all intentionally on the technical side. I was wondering, just to have a more concrete picture in my head, how would you see, as an example, a set of standards so you can join all this data together and access it? Is it something like, I don't know, putting it all in an object storage, or how would that work, especially in the world of big data where you handle large data
I think
sets?
you need to have a declarative standard. So for example, if you're creating an API marketplace, consuming data from several data storages, that is a possibility which is already there. I think data governance is an issue, how you create that kind of mentality within the organization, that development teams are participating in the governance of products in order to subscribe that standard. And I think then it's important that you have a kind of discipline also in the organization, that the people responsible for creating the product recognize the fact, if I'm developing on a standard, first of all, it helps my own product in terms of distribution, other people are consuming it. And of course, it helps me to improve my product because I can consume the data products of other organizational parts of that. And that needs to be clarified, a declarative standard.
Okay, and speaking of governance, how does this work when you have all these compliance requirements like GDPR, COPPA, and so on? Isn't that like a big pressure on the data product teams to include specialized people for data protection, for stuff like that? Does it scale well?
I think it's no difference to today, because if you are at the end today dealing with data which are GDPR relevant, you are responsible even more. Of course, you're distributing it now to a central IT, and they have a big stack of solving, or the legal department of solving issues like that. But I think it scales better at the end, because you make the people responsible who are responsible for it, and you're not distributing the responsibility over the whole organization. That's my thinking.
I saw one more there. Do you have any? Let's do one in the back, and then I'll come to you.
Here, okay.
Okay. In what way this model it is different from, let's say, having each department building his, let's say, his own mini data lake and exposing it to the others.
Yeah.
How is this different?
So if you are in traditional organizations, in generally you have the way that business departments are paying the IT to doing investments into the infrastructure. This is a decentralized, no, not a decentralized, a centralized way of coping with that. And I think that is a different way of that domain departments are taking care of the responsibility, and so far you're changing the whole business process in traditional companies. That needs to be said. I can't talk for the Google's data native organizations like that. I guess it's different there. But in traditional organizations, this will change the whole working process in terms of IT in the organization.
So basically here it's more like a change of culture. The change of culture is much more important than the technology.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, for example, I mean, you would need, for example, how do you data explore? How do you expose the metadata and all this information?
Yes. Product discovery, things like that. Data discovery. Yes, that's why I said it's a socio-cultural management system, not a technological one. Of course, it needs to be supported by technology.
Yeah. Also, how difficult would be, in your opinion, to basically do this kind of, let's say, not enforcing. It's not a good word, enforcing. Let's say spreading the culture, because basically you will need to, again, I don't like impose, but anyway, you need to impose some kind of standards in the whole company. Yeah, and that is something that can be extremely difficult.
Yes, I'm with you. Yes, that's why I said I think it's a process of transformation where you're adapting and you're hiring your maturity level in order to get to a picture like that. Of course, you're not doing that on next Monday, for sure. But if you're addressing the people on their awareness level, so for example, business processes is a pretty good one, because especially in departments, people are identifying themselves with their own business process. And if you put it around that, so for example, an analytical task, or many people are very well advanced in Excel, and a lot of people are laughing about that, but this kind of tool is creating value for them. So at the end, they are doing it somehow. The difference would be that you are trying to create a kind of culture that you are exporting that to your sister department, and you're consuming the data out of the other department. But yes, I'm with you. Of course, that is a change. But I believe 100% if organizations are not running in this direction, that is getting, at least they are trying to create that path, it will be very, very difficult to stay competitive for them from an organizational perspective.
And how do you solve the problem of, let's say, repeated duplicate processing? I mean, for example, one simple example would be that many people, many parts of the organization need, let's say, as complete as possible image of a customer. Since the data is distributed, they will have either to do the same processing repeatedly. I mean, each of them goes to different data stores, takes the data, process it, and obtain this image. But this could lead to a duplicate processing, a lot of duplicate processing. So how would you, how do you, or how would you handle this problem?
So I think if you combine the business responsibility with the data responsibility, you're coming to a point that they are acting from a business perspective and not so much what the CRM system, for example, is saying. And of course, you need to take care there of the clear responsibilities. Yeah, let me think about that. I think that's important issue. I don't know whether also customer data of a customer image of personas are the right information for that. Maybe it's more about business improvement of analytical data, for example. So behavioral data, not so much about the address of clients and so on. So this CRM topic out of that. But let me think about it. I don't know. Maybe we can discuss it afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can follow up on LinkedIn.
Sorry?
Maybe they can follow up on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's good.
So I have one more question, but can you come here because I think it will.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. By the way,
problem.
really cool to see that people are breaking ice on the data mesh. 2 questions. So we're saying about decentralization of the data. However, we feel, and I think there are plenty of questions like that, we feel that even though you'll have domain-specific teams that will manage the data, at some point you have this bounded context where you anyway at some point will need something from another team. So you'll have these cross-team projects, right? So you'll have somebody to manage like what's important and what's not, and I think this was one of the questions. And how do you perceive this, like in your case today, how do you manage that? Like you have a scrum of scrums, or how do you manage that?
I think I had it on one chart. I didn't address it right now. Yes, that's a possibility. If you're creating product teams, cross-functional, of course you need to have somebody who is leading the product team. So there is a kind of set. Maybe that kind of organizational concept needs to be developed. That you have a kind of product manager, what you have in a software team, for example. A product manager, product team, data product, X and Y, however you call it.
Okay, and then the following question. So today, usually we know waterfall is something that, you have the project, you know the end goal, you know how much it costs, right? And in case of Scrum, we know it costs more, but you can iterate faster, right?
Yes.
Well, with this paradigm, basically we'll pay more, right? Because you'll have different teams managing different data. You will do probably reprocessing of the same context twice, and here and there, you'll need to hire more data engineers. So how does this, let's say, what's your opinion on this? Is it more cost effective than the actual, let's say, data lake world?
I think that's a very difficult argumentation. Let's say it like that. You have in big organization the tendency, I would argue it the other way around. You have in big organization the tendency to talk about cost synergies by centralizing. I'm working now since several years with companies like that, and you have that development of waves. So you have one organizational time over a period of 3 or 4 centralizations happening also at Volkswagen, so for example, then they are decentralizing back to the brands. I think the costs of creating bottlenecks by centralization are higher than the additional costs for additional people in a decentralized organization, I think.
So you're saying it's like a long run. That's the idea, basically.
A centralized organization can deliver. As soon as the requirements are getting around at the number of stakeholders who are participating there, you can't scale it anymore. That's my thinking, but I wouldn't say now in euro it's that, or in RON it's that. That's a difficult argumentation. And you need to consider then also this is the cost perspective is one thing, but if you look at the top line of the costs creating an innovative culture, an accelerating innovative culture, I think that needs to be considered in that calculation also. But my experience is centralized organizations, they have a limit. They're coming to a point and then they are not scaling anymore. They're not jumping. They're becoming a problem. At least that's what I'm trying to tell with the smileys there on the chart.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Thank you. Thanks, Tobias.
Thank you.
Great talk.